Salah and Son have gone to their international tournaments. This video is going to help you pick the best replacements. First of all, you can see the probability on the screen of when Son will return from the Asian Cup. You'll see Salah's probability shortly as well. Feel free to take a screenshot because these graphics will be useful. It's worth noting that I've not included Game Week 21 because there's absolutely no chance that either of them will be back by then. There is a slightly higher chance that Salah will return sooner, but it doesn't mean that he will. There is an argument to hold on to Salah, not because he could return sooner, but because Liverpool are likely to have a double in Game Week 25. But with him likely to be disappearing for at least 3 game weeks, I'll probably sell him and chase the upside. I'll just have to make sure that I leave enough money in the bank to get back to him. That'll either be in Game Week 24 against Burnley at home, or for the potential double in Game Week 25. So starting with the first potential replacement, I think Ødegaard's worth considering. And this shortlist does exclude Saka because I'm assuming that you already have him in your team. I think it's pretty obvious that he's the best pick from this point onwards, whilst Salah and Son are absent. As for Ødegaard, what I like about him is that he's nailed. He's got the second highest expected minutes on the shortlist, which gives him more chance to get goals and assists, and there's a lower chance of him getting dropped. He's also got the second highest points projection on FPL review as well. I think his expected minutes play a big part in that. Of course, he does take some set pieces as well. There's a chance that he does take the odd penalty off Saka, but that is on a rare occasion. The team he plays for have also had the best defensive numbers in the whole league so far this season, with the lowest expected goals conceded figure, which means every single match he's usually got a higher chance of obtaining a clean sheet point, and that is a small advantage over other midfielders. And what I don't like about him is his underlying stats. He's got the least promising on the whole shortlist with only 0.35 per 90 minutes. He's also got one of the lowest non-penalty outputs as well. So all things considered, he has got one of the highest floors, so if you're a safe manager that doesn't like to take any risks, he is worth considering. As for me, I like to take risks. I prefer to have a high ceiling player that's explosive in matches, so I won't be bringing him in, and I don't think he's got the best of fixtures either, but I am going to be fair and still say he's not a bad option. Someone who I think is a better option that not many people will be discussing is Pascal Gross. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, he's got much easier fixtures. Ødegaard had 1 red and no green. Gross has got 3 green and no red. Whilst his review projection is lower, his expected minutes are similar, he's got the exact same set pieces, he's got much better underlying stats, and his output's higher as well. He's also 2 mil cheaper, so you could invest that 2 mil elsewhere in your squad, or you could sell one of your other midfielders to get back to Salah or Son. Unfortunately, he won't be taking penalties whilst Pedro's on the pitch, but we all know Pedro's got dodgy minutes, so there is a chance that he won't be on the pitch whilst he get awarded a penalty, and it would be Gross to take it. One thing that I really don't like about Gross is that he's prone to playing in a deeper position, and there is a negative for all of these players on the shortlist, but I think this is one of the biggest negatives, and I know that some of these stats have been accumulated in those deeper positions. I just don't think that's sustainable. I think Richarlison puts in an even stronger case. He's got the highest review points projection on the whole shortlist, he's got the best underlying stats, he's got the second highest output as well. There is a really high chance that he'll be on penalty duties whilst Son's at the Asia Cup, especially when Maddison's not playing. I also really like the fact that he plays out of position, gets 5 points for every goal scored, but playing as a forward he should really get 4. His expected minutes are just below average overall. In the first couple of matches they're very high, that's whilst Son's gone, but in the latter matches obviously Son's due back, and Spurs are linked with Werner whilst this video's being recorded. They might even bring him in, and of course they will probably share minutes. That's unless Richarlison keeps his form up, and that wouldn't surprise me as an Evertonian. He kept us in the Premier League for 2 seasons on the bounce. Right now we'd be in the Championship but for him. He hasn't had the best of starts to his Spurs career, but he was very good at Everton, Watford and Brazil, and I think we've just seen the start of what he can do at Spurs as well. However, there is a massive downside. There's roughly an 80% chance that Spurs will blank in Game Week 26, and this video is being recorded before the Chelsea EFL Cup match. If Chelsea progress through that round, Spurs will blank and so will Chelsea. So if we ignored the blank and double game weeks, even with these average fixtures, Richarlison would be my favourite option on the whole shortlist, but because of the potential blank game week, which is very likely, he's actually my second favourite. Next is a player who I think is a similar option to Ødegaard, maybe slightly a little bit better. It's Bruno Fernandes. What I like about Bruno is that he's got 2 easy fixtures and an average one, while Salah and Son are probably still going to be away. Then the percentages imply that they are going to be back ahead of Game Week 24. That is likely. It doesn't mean that's going to happen, and I wouldn't mind keeping him for one more game week, but even still, if one of them comes back and not the other, you could always swap Bruno for that player. Another thing that I like about him is that he's a set-piece specialist, and that does include penalty duties. His underlying stats are pretty average, but they are still better than Ødegaard's, and they are non-penalty stats. He's also got penalty duties as well. The only problem is, he has got the worst output on the whole shortlist. That's not enough to put me off though, because the expected numbers are better at projecting the future numbers than the actual previous numbers themselves. I would pick him over Ødegaard and Gross, but I do think Richarlison does have a higher upside. Before I move on to the next player, I am going to give you a word of warning. There is a possible blank game week 26 for Bruno. That's for United and Fulham. That would only happen if Fulham progress in the EFL Cup semi-final. They'd have to beat Liverpool over 2 legs. That's unlikely and there's only a 20% chance of that, but it's worth keeping your eye on. Next up is another set-piece specialist on penalties. That's Eze. He's got similar underlying stats, but with players getting more points for every goal scored than an assist, I do like the fact that they're weighted more on expected goals. Just like Bruno, he is underperforming them. I just hope that his underlying stats regress. His expected minutes are average, but he has got the joint lowest review points projection, and I think that's because he's got the most difficult fixture in the first match against Arsenal away. You can enjoy that. You've got Sheffield United at home. You could argue that's the best fixture in the league. As much as Eze is still a decent option, that first fixture really does put me off, and I put him in the category with Ødegaard and Gross, where I probably won't go for them. I do prefer Bruno and Richarlison over him. Penultimately is Palmer. He's got the second best underlying stats on the shortlist. He's also got the second highest output as well. Out of all these players, he's expected to provide the highest points per million because he's only 5.6 mil. And one thing that he does offer, being the cheapest player, is that if you bring him in for Salah or Son, you could easily invest the money elsewhere and then sell one of your other midfielders to bring them back in. That is something that you could do with Eze as well. He's only 0.4 mil more, but I think Palmer's a better option. To be fair, his expected minutes are slightly below average, but he's got an average points projection with that factored in. So if he had the expected minutes of the other players, he would have a higher points projection and he would be competing right at the top. This shows how high his upside is. And just like the previous 2 players, he is on set pieces, including penalties. But just like the other midfielders, he's not perfect either. He is likely to blank in game week 26, but to be fair, if you've got Palmer in your team, it's likely that you've got another 7 good attackers with the budget that you've got remaining. That is a downside that you'd have to manage, but if you really want to have more money in your bank and more flexibility before Salah and Son return, and to get Salah and Son back in your team, then Palmer is a really good option. I'd say that I prefer Palmer to Bruno because that will probably save a free transfer in future, and of course you get that flexibility with your budget, but I think Richarlison's upside is too strong for Palmer. Last and certainly not least is Foden. Now there are plenty of negatives to him. He's got 2 difficult fixtures in the first 3 fixtures, he's not on penalty duties, and it's questionable whether he will take any set pieces whatsoever. And when all of that information comes together, he's got the joint lowest points projection. But there is another way of looking at it. De Bruyne recently came out and said that he doesn't expect to play many minutes in the upcoming fixtures, so this will mean that Foden and Alvarez are expected to play higher minutes, which would increase his projected points. In my opinion, I think his form will increase his expected minutes as well. That's just from an eye test perspective. Obviously, this video is a bit more stats based, but for me, when you watch him on the pitch recently, he's one of the best players on the pitch, and I don't see how he loses his position. He has got decent underlying stats, he's got the 3rd best on the shortlist, he's also got the 3rd highest output on the shortlist to back it up as well. So I do think Foden is the riskiest player because he's got the lowest floor, but then at the same time, I do think he's got the highest ceiling. If someone came to me and told me that every single player on the shortlist was going to play 90 minutes, I wouldn't think twice about picking him over the other players. Another benefit for Foden is that City are likely to double in game week 25 as well, so with Richarlison having the potential blank, I would just about put Foden ahead of Richarlison and say that he's the best replacement for Salah and Son. If you already own Foden, I would still go for Richarlison. I still think he's a really good option. If you want to replace both Salah and Son, then I go for Foden and Richarlison. My 3rd favourite player is Palmer, then he's followed by Bruno. I'll be happy to make more videos like this if you found it informative. Make sure you make me aware by hitting that subscribe button.